She's not answering. Oh. Testing. Okay, good. Happy Hanukkah. Okay, so we're going to start again from the beginning of chapter 28, and we will, and then we'll continue. Basically, we are dealing with a different type of negative sort of thoughts or emotions that enter the person, and these are negative thoughts that enter the person's mind during his prayer or study. Yeah, up until now we dealt with 4 other kinds. I will summarize soon the different kinds of obstacles, negative emotions, or thoughts that enter a person's mind. Now we're dealing with those that enter a person's mind while he's trying to study, and he can't stop thinking about his nightmare. Can't stop thinking about his doctor's appointment that's coming up after class. He's davening in the morning, and he can't stop thinking about the meeting he has afterwards. That if it goes wrong, it can go terribly wrong. He just can't get his mind to focus on the prayers. So we're going to deal with that type of bugging scenario soon. However, now the Alter Rebbe is talking about sort of like a more impure thoughts that enter the person's mind. So the person is thinking, he's starting to daven, and he's thinking about, I don't know, the breakfast he's going to have afterwards. It's not like a troubling thought. He's whetting his appetite. He's salivating. Is that the word? Salivating over the food he's going to have or over the bagel he just had, and he can't focus on the prayer. Okay, so even if lustful imaginings or other extraneous thoughts occur to him during his service of God in Torah or in prayer with kavanah, with intent, we're on page 375. He should pay them no attention, but avert his mind from them immediately. Remember, last week we discussed the option of perhaps trying to elevate these thoughts, and that's not a good option. Alter Rebbe negates that option. And then he says, and that's what he's going to do now. Nor should he be so foolish as to engage in sublimation of the midot. In other words, to elevate the emotions, the attributes of the extraneous thoughts. As is known, we mentioned last week that this comes from the Magid, that one can overcome extraneous thoughts by elevating their source. Yeah, but Alter Rebbe negates that. Why? If it comes from his Rebbe, why would he negate this approach? For such things were intended only for tzaddikim, in whom there do not occur any evil thoughts of their own evil midot, but only from the midot of others. But as for one, in other words, the Beinoni, a struggler, like me and you, to whom there occurs an evil thought of his own, from the evil that is lodged in the left part of his heart, in other words, the evil midot of his animal soul, how can he raise it up to the spiritual realm when he himself is bound below by his desire for the material? Yeah. We discussed last night during class, after class, that, and we had this in last course, in the spring, I think it was a spring course, Supernatural, about dreams, that today's day and age, because we are not in control of our thoughts and our minds wander during the day, so 99.9% of the time, the things we dream about at night are not real dreams. In other words, they're not messages that are being sent to us by heaven. They are just the product of our wandering mind during the day. So when it says in the Talmud, or it says in the Code of Jewish Law even, that if you have a terrible dream, you should even fast on Shabbos, yeah? That's only if you know that the dream is a message. But not for the average person that his mind wanders. We don't control our mind 99% of the time. So we can assume that if we had a dream, it was probably triggered by even a passing thought we had during the day. So here also, it's not the same thing here, but it's the same idea, that because we are not capable of, because these negative thoughts are our own, means we're in the mud, we can't pull ourselves up from the mud by ourselves. We need someone else to help us out. Tzaddik, who the negative thoughts that come into his head are not his own, he can elevate them. But because they're ours, we can't. Okay. Nevertheless, he must not be downhearted nor feel dejected and despicable because of this occurrence of extraneous thoughts during his service of God, when he ought to be most joyous. So he's supposed to be happy now, but now he's a little sad. Why? Because where are these thoughts coming from? He's trying to daven. Where are these thoughts? So remember, we discussed last week, this would only be a correct concern if he has one soul. If you have one soul, then I'm trying to focus. Why is my soul thinking about what it had for breakfast or what it's going to have for breakfast? I'm trying to daven. But yes, that would be a real concern. I can't focus. But if you have two souls and you recognize that as soon as one soul turns on the engine, and the other soul is trying to fight, is trying to battle, right? The souls are battling over the body. So as soon as one soul turns on his engine, the other one does, because it has to make sure it doesn't overrun it. So because you're focusing on davening, that's why the animal soul wakes up and starts throwing in all these thoughts to your head. So if you're trying to daven and it's going smoothly, you're not working hard. You're not employing your godly soul. When you trying to daven and you have foreign thoughts coming into your head, now you know you're doing something right. You irritated the animal soul enough that he's trying to bombard you.
So you're saying that because I'm calm and concentrating when I put on my tefillin, I'm not doing good enough?
No. What I'm saying is that because I know you're working hard to get to that calm and concentration. If you would tell me that it's like you wake up in the morning, it's just so easy for you just to do it and you concentrate, then you're not working. Right? It's just second nature. You're not working. You're not doing a bad thing. But a person is supposed to serve God. If it's not hard for you, then you're not serving him. Okay. You're just on autopilot.
Yeah, definitely that's not all.
Now, it's not now. So you'll say, so am I supposed to leave it hard? No. You try to make whatever's hard now, you try to get used to it and make it easy so you can grow and get to the next level, which is going to be hard for you when you get to it, right? Every level you go to is hard when you start. The more you get used to it, the more easy it becomes, so to speak. And then once it becomes easy, now you know you're not working anymore. Now you have to go higher. And that's what we already learned. I don't know if you remember in chapter 15 of Tanya, he calls the Beinani someone who serves God and the Tzaddik someone who doesn't serve God.
Okay.
What does it mean he doesn't serve God? Because he's not working hard. Now, a Tzaddik could serve God. But if a Tzaddik isn't paying attention and he's just letting it go on if a Beinani goes on autopilot, he's going to be sinning, right? Because the Beinani the animal soul is just as strong by him. So if a Beinani takes his eye off the game, he's going to be sinning. He's not going to be a Beinani. If the Tzaddik takes it easy and turns on cruise control, he'll be doing everything right, but he won't be serving God because he won't be growing.
Yeah, but if he's already reached the ultimate part?
He hasn't reached the ultimate.
So in other words, even
for him,
the Tzaddik, he's still got a long way to go
he's reached the ultimate of Tanya. But the Tanya was written for the Beinani. The Alter Rebbe wrote a different book to teach a tzaddik how to, whatever the Alter Rebbe is teaching you here, the Alter Rebbe taught the tzaddik in the book for tzaddikim, which we don't have.
I guess I won't need that one.
No, the average person won't need it. That's what he says, right? The average, that's what we're going to say. We're going to say soon, okay? We actually, I think we said this. Did we say it already last week? Okay, well, let's read it inside. So the person is going to be saddened by the fact that he's trying to daven and all these foreign thoughts are entering his mind. What's going on? He shouldn't be saddened by this because you have to be happy when you daven. On the contrary, he should draw fresh strength and intensify his determination with all his power to pray with concentration, with even greater joy and gladness. Why should he have even more joy and gladness? Because he's having these foreign thoughts coming into his head. That seems counterintuitive in the realization that the foreign thought which occurred to him derives from the klipa of the left part of the heart, which wages war within the Beinani against the divine soul within him. Now, it is known that it is the way of combatants who seek to destroy one another, and similarly of wrestlers who aim merely to topple one another. In other words, not combatants who are trying literally to defeat the other, but here it's just for play, just for gain. That when one is gaining the upper hand, the other likewise exerts himself with all the resources of his strength in order to prevail. Yeah, if you're the stronger one in the battle, you're not going to go in full force. You're going to wait to see what the other guy has, and then you'll exert as much force necessary to overpower. You're not going to come out with a nuclear bomb, right, when the threat can be eliminated with a peace talk. Yeah? You're not going to come out with bombs if the person can be negotiated with. And even if the person can't be negotiated with, you're not going to come out with a nuclear bomb if they can be dealt with in an orderly, in a more orderly fashion. You come out with the nukes when there's no other way, when the world will come apart. Yeah, I don't mean nukes. I mean the heavy guns, right? The big tools. So as long as the person isn't utilizing his godly soul, the animal soul has no reason to wake up. It has no reason. The person's doing his work, right? The godly soul isn't active, so the animal soul doesn't either have to be active. Therefore, in the battle between the divine soul and the animal soul, when the divine soul exerts itself and musters all its strength in prayer, thereby to weaken, what's he trying to do? To weaken or even vanquish the animal soul. Now that's an alarm clock for the animal soul. So then the Kalipa and the animal soul too gather strength to counter it, aiming to confuse and topple the divine soul by means of a foreign thought of its own. Yeah? So in other words, when you're trying to daven, I don't mean when you walk into shul and your mind just isn't there and you sit down and your mind is wandering, you're not going to become sad by that. You're going to be disappointed that you're in shul. But when you're trying to focus and your mind can't focus because you're busy thinking about all these thoughts, then you get frustrated. Then you get nervous. Why can't I focus? Now, the Rebbe says, don't get so sad. Realize that you're obviously doing something right. If the animal soul is so intent on getting your mind distracted, you're doing something right. Continue doing it. Continue fighting.
So therefore, in my case, when I'm going through my morning service, my morning prayers, and the Hebrew that I already know, I can zip through that. You're right, my mind wanders. So what I should be doing is making sure that I'm learning a new piece.
One second.
When I learn a new piece,
There's another option, but it's not for the video. But Dale reminded me of something this morning. He sent me a text about the conversation we had yesterday, and I have an idea. Remind me before we leave.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
It also reminds me of remember Pac-Man? When
Yes.
the Pac-Man video game came out, it was brand new. Everybody was trying it and making mistakes along the way. But then you're doing it over and over again. You get past the first level and second level. When you get up to, then the first. If you make a mistake, then you go back to the beginning.
Right.
And you go through levels 1 through 5 or 6,
Almost with your eyes closed.
Right.
No.
Exactly. Mindlessly, literally mindlessly.
Exactly.
Then when you get to the new part,
now you're focused again.
I got it right. You have to focus and you have to learn the new patterns and stuff.
Very good.
And I think that's.
Well, you already date yourself.
They had there was a restaurant up near Whitfield called 247. That was like the highest level that you could get. That was the name of it.
Oh, really?
Not there anymore.
Okay, let's continue here. This refutes, a common error. When a foreign thought occurs to some people during prayer, they mistakenly conclude that their prayer is worthless. Why do they conclude that? For if one prayed properly and correctly, so they mistakenly believe, no foreign thoughts would arise in his mind. That would be the obvious conclusion. They would be correct if there would be but one soul within a person. The same soul that prays, being also the one that thinks and ponders on the foreign thoughts. So now, if you're busy praying, that soul shouldn't have what do they call in the computer, the memory or the CPU, the memory to be able to think about something else. It'll crash if it thinks about something else. It can't even go there. So if I'm busy davening, I shouldn't be having foreign thoughts. That would be true if there's one soul. But in fact, there are two souls, each waging war against the other in the person's mind. Each of them wishes and desires to rule and pervade the mind exclusively. So all thoughts of Torah and the fear of God come from the godly soul, while all thoughts of worldly matters derive from the animal soul. Except that the godly soul is clothed within it, in other words, within the animal soul, because the animal soul gives the body life. Where's the godly soul? In the body. So sort of the godly soul, the animal soul is the upper hand. Because the nature, the default of the animal soul, of the body, is closer to the animal soul. If you remember, we spoke about in the beginning of Tanya, 3 levels. There's kedusha, there's holiness. Then there is impurity. And then there's klipas noga. There's sort of the neutral ground of something that could be used for holiness and could be used. Yeah. This neutral ground, which we said is 99% of existence, 99% of the things we do is this neutral ground. Yeah, eating, sleeping, working, whatever we do that's not Torah, mitzvah, prayer, is this neutral ground. 99% of it could be holy, could be impure. But which one is it closer to? What's it called? Remember what it's called? Klipas noga. So it's closer to klipa, right? Now, even if you'll say it's midway, but it's easier for it to become full-blown klipa than it to become kedusha, holiness. Why? Because to make it godly, to make it holy, you have to have intent. However, if you eat, sleep, and work mindlessly, it automatically gets lowered to the lower klipas. Yeah. So the godly soul is at a disadvantage of it, because the body is sort of by default the expression of the animal soul. Now, the animal soul wants to rule the body, wants to not allow the godly soul expression in the body. But if the person's godly soul went to sleep, then the person's body would instinctively reflect his animal soul. And that's why most people that don't have anything religious or holy in their lives, yeah, are primarily selfish people. Not selfish in a bad way necessarily, but their lives revolve around what they need. Whether it's what they need to do, what their family, if they look out for their family, it's because it's their family. If they look out for their community, it's because it's their community. They're doing it for themselves. So you do beautiful things if you live a selfish life. You could do disgusting things too if you take the selfishness to an extreme. But that very rarely do people take their whole lives to that extreme. Although we all have certain areas that we take to that extreme, perhaps. But in order for the godly soul to prevail, that takes a lot of effort. Because you're fighting not only the animal soul, you're also fighting the nature of your body, which has been programmed like that for years, especially that till the bar mitzvah, the godly soul doesn't really enter, doesn't fully enter the person, which is why the child isn't obligated in any mitzvahs, because they're primarily self-centered, they're primarily animal soul. Yeah. Okay, but before we continue, there's an interesting story that sort of relates to what Jay was dealing with davening being easy, coming easy. I think I mentioned it once that there was a non-Jew that somehow came into Judaism, started coming to shul. He davened every day for years, and 3 times a day he'd come to shul, and he started becoming very, very connected until he wanted to convert. And he went through a whole conversion process. And then a few weeks after his conversion, he comes to the rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, I don't get it. For years I've been coming here and davening, and it's been an amazing experience. And now I come here and I'm like trying to get it over with." So the rabbi turns to him and says, "Now I know you're Jewish." Why? Because if you have one soul, primarily one soul, then if you focus that soul on prayer, it's not going anywhere else, because now it's focused on this. But if you have 2 souls, it's a constant struggle. So there's a story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. You have to be a tzaddik for this, but this is how far it can go. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, of the author of the Tanya, and disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And he used to travel around collecting money to free prisoners from the local Polish squires that would imprison their Jewish employees for lack of payment of their dues. And so once he chanced upon a Jewish family in prison, a Jewish person in prison, so he started going around collecting money. And in the middle, he stopped and left. They asked him what happened. So he said, "It's not a real prisoner." And they went and realized that this Polish squire dressed up some peasant in a Jewish attire to try to extract money from the Jewish community. He knew that if the Jewish community thinks there's a Jew in prison, they'll pay ransom. So they asked Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, "How did you know that it wasn't a real case of freeing a Jewish prisoner. So he said, because everyone was giving money, it was the easiest tzedakah collection I ever made. It wasn't difficult. I was asking people were giving. I knew it wasn't real tzedakah. It wasn't for a real purpose. Because when your godly soul is trying to do something, the animal soul puts up a fight. But if the animal soul is sleeping, that means you're doing the work of the animal soul. You're not doing work of the godly soul. So it goes to sleep. It doesn't need to wake up. Yeah. Okay. There is another option, though, that a person might want to employ to get rid of these thoughts, and that is a war, to fight them. So the first way was to elevate them. That we said you can't do. You can't elevate these negative thoughts that enter your mind. You have to ignore them. What about to fight them? A thought comes into my mind. I'm going to sit and battle it and argue with it and try to get it out of my mind. Say, what are you doing here now? I'm not interested in you now. Try to get it out. Why isn't that a good option? So the Alter Rebbe is going to address that now, because there's a saying in the Talmud that if you battle with a low life, it drags you down, for lack of a better term. Yeah? What's the dirtiest job you can have? The filthiest job you can have?
Sewer cleaner.
A cleaner. A cleaner is the dirtiest job you can have. Yeah, you get that?
Yeah.
So if you're trying to clean, if you're trying to battle with a negative thought to sort of prove to it that it shouldn't come here, you're trying to get rid of it, it could make you dirty. It could dirty you. And therefore you run the risk of getting too entangled with all of these foreign negative thoughts that fall into your head. There's a metaphor that's brought of the way the difference in a cedar tree and like a thorn, but like a smaller tree deal with snow. Yeah, although I don't know if cedar trees, I don't know where they grow exactly.
Lebanon.
Right, in warmer climates, probably. But the point is, a very strong tree, what happens? The snow comes on it. It's little snowflakes. It doesn't care. So the snow sits, piles up, and then the snow gets very, very heavy, and it topples the whole tree. But a little tree, when the snow comes on it, it can't handle the snow, even if it's a little. So the branches sort of bend down, the snow falls off, and it can last the whole winter because it never lets the snow accumulate on it. The same thing here. If you deal with, and Yiddish is the word gribbel, you interact with, or you even give it consideration, you're almost like legitimizing it a little. At least in your head, you're legitimizing it enough. You're legitimizing these thoughts enough to fight with them. And primarily, he's talking about here not what you're having for breakfast, because that's a foreign thought. That's not necessarily a negative thought. That's just not for now. But he started with lustful thoughts, right? Thoughts that are inappropriate, not just during prayer, anytime. So if you're going to deal with it, it might just suck you in. So therefore, the only way to deal with it, just don't think about it. The only way to do that is to have something else to think about. If you're just going to try to push the thought out of your mind, it'll never work. You can only push it up. You know how the way you clean things is you have to push something else through it to push out the schmutz, right? If you just try to get the schmutz out, there's always going to be something left. But if you put in something tight enough that it just squeezes everything out, why? Because you have to fill it with something else. If you just leave it a vacuum, it'll suck other things in. And if you're not going to control what it sucks in, it'll suck in all the schmutz that it can think of. And therefore, you have to get rid of it. However, the Alter Rebbe is going to address one more possibility. There is a possibility where the thoughts are so pervasive that you can't stop thinking. You try, and you can't get your mind off of it. And the Alter Rebbe is going to give us a spiritual tip of what to do. Let's continue inside. Top of page 380. This is, to use an example, like a person who is praying with devotion. While facing him, there stands a wicked heathen who chats and speaks to him Not because he doesn't realize he's praying, which happens all the time, right? I could be davening, the cleaning lady comes in or someone comes in, they're trying to talk to me. They don't realize my kids do it all, the little kids that don't understand yet, they do it all the time. But this person is doing it in order to confuse him. He sees he's davening, he wants to confuse him. So surely the best advice in this case would be to answer him neither good nor evil. In other words, don't engage. Why? What's he trying to do? Distract you. So if you're going to engage him, he accomplished his mission. He distracted you. Even if you're being distracted, try to focus. But rather to act as though he were deaf without hearing. And to comply with the verse, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you too become like him. Just as in the analogy of the heathen who disturbs one during prayer, so too when foreign thoughts enter one's mind while praying, this is like the heathen trying to distract you. It's the animal soul trying to distract you. He should answer nothing at all, nor should he engage in argument against the foreign thought. In other words, he should not occupy himself with mental discussions on the best strategy for countering the foreign thought. And here's the key. This is from the Talmud based on this verse. For he who wrestles with a filthy person is bound to become soiled himself. So what do? Instead, he should pretend not to know, nor hear the foreign thoughts that occur to him. He should dismiss them from his mind and strengthen still more the power of his concentration.
The thing that comes to my mind is Joseph and the angel that he's troubled with.
Jacob.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That seems to be related to this in some way.
So there he struggled with it, and Yaakov was a tzaddik. So Yaakov was able. The angel wasn't his angel, wasn't his demon. It was Esav's angel. Yeah. So a tzaddik, because a tzaddik when a tzaddik has to struggle with foreign things, because they're not his, he's in the world to purify the world. So he's able to struggle. He's able to fight with it because he doesn't have to get too close to it in order to deal with it. Imagine there is a person that's made out of some sort of fiber material that the dirt doesn't stick to you. Imagine you had a person, wasn't human like the rest of us, didn't have hair that gets dirty, the skin was just smooth like a plastic fiber thing, and who would we hire to go in the sores? This guy, right? Because he's not affected by the schmutz of the sore. He comes out, rinses off, and he's as clean as ever. Doesn't smell, nothing. The dirt doesn't get into him. So you have a tzaddik, and that's why you go to a tzaddik to try to help you with your demons, with the things you deal with. Try to get guidance of how to deal with it. Because the tzaddik is separate from it, so he can sort of fight with it from a distance almost. Not a real distance, but a distance that it doesn't muddy him. Whereas because these thoughts are my thoughts, if I get caught up in it, it's just going to pull me down. We brought the example last week. If you're standing in mud and you're trying to get out, you start kicking and waving your hands, you're just going to sink deeper. You need someone else to come and pull you out. So when it comes to someone like Yaakov can fight an angel, and Yaakov beat the angel, right? Whereas if me or you would have seen that angel, I don't know if we would have been successful in that fight. But this is the first thing Alter Rebbe has told us in the beginning of the chapter. If you expect yourself to be able to fight the angel, to be able to fight the demon, you're fooling yourself because you think you're a tzaddik. You think you're capable of doing that? Don't you know you have an animal soul that's as vibrant as it was the day it was born? You've got so much of your own schmutz to deal with. You think you're going to fight this? Right? You're fooling yourself of your position, of what you're capable of. And so, therefore, the only reason we get sad or depressed about our shortcomings is because we consider them shortcomings. But if we're a struggler, if we're a Beinoni, it's not a shortcoming. The fact that I have lustful thoughts that enter my mind when I start davening, that's not a shortcoming. If I was a tzaddik, that would be a shortcoming. That would be a reason to be depressed. But because I'm a struggle, it's not a shortcoming. That means I have a healthy animal soul. Yeah? Now I have my work cut out for me. But that shouldn't be a reason for depression. If I'm at a job and it's hard labor, I'm bricklaying, that's not a reason to be depressed. But if I'm a typist and the keyboard isn't typing the words and I have to bang my fingers and it's hurting my fingers, that's a reason to be depressed. Why? Because the thing isn't working. It's supposed to work and it's not. So you get a new keyboard. But if you're going to be depressed because the bricklaying is heavy, then you're not strong enough to lay bricks. No reason to be depressed about that. Just get out of that line of work. Right? It sounds comedic. It almost sounds like funny that the Rebbe even has to tell this to us. But if we think about it, it's so helpful in everything in life that we get depressed about are 99% of the time things either we can't control, or even if we can control them, the reason we're depressed is not because it's not because we tried to control it and it didn't work. It's because we were too lazy to control it, right? We dropped the ball, something. But if it's something you're capable of doing, you didn't do it, get up and do it. Yeah, you're depressed because you didn't get up and do it. You could have done it, you didn't. But the things that you couldn't do, you're not depressed about those things. And if you are, you're fooling yourself to think, I could have cured cancer. If you're depressed that a loved one is sick and you didn't figure out the cure, that's a foolish depression. There could be a deep sadness to that. There could be a deep empathy and but to be depressed because how come I didn't overcome this? What do you mean? You didn't go to school for it? Why would you be able to overcome that? I didn't mean to. That wasn't the best example, but okay. So, but there could be times when the thoughts are so pervasive that you just can't get rid of them. What do? Yeah. So here comes Alter Rebbe tells us: if in the middle of 381, if, however, he finds it difficult to dismiss them because they distract his mind with great intensity, then there's only one option. Then he should humble his soul before God and daven, supplicate him in his thought to have compassion upon him in his abundant mercies, like a father who takes pity on his children, who stem from his brain. And so should God be compassionate on his soul, which derives from the mind of God, the attribute of Chachma is explained in chapter 2, to rescue it from the turbulent waters. In other words, the thoughts which disturb the soul. Then he should do for his own sake. In other words, God should do it for his sake, since truly his people are a part of the Lord. In other words, just like a child, you don't make everything in life easy for the child. You want the child to work. Yeah. If the child gives up and comes and says, Dad, Mom, I tried, I can't do it. Are you right away going to acquiesce and say, okay, I'll do it for you? No. You're going to want to know, did he really try? And you're going to try to determine that. But once you know they really tried and they still couldn't do it, are you going to just tell them to try harder? No, then you're going to give them a hand. Because now you know either they're not capable of doing it, or they weren't capable in this situation, or even if they were, they really did put in an effort. So I'm going to give it to them this time. Maybe next time they'll be able to push that little extra and get it done themselves. And if they can't, I'm a parent. I probably still have Rahmanis and do it again. Not because if the child really couldn't do it, then you're cruel for making him do it. If you realize this is too hard for your child, making him do it, even with your help, is cruel, right? If you know they really can't do it. So if we really couldn't overcome these thoughts, Hashem wouldn't give them to us if we really couldn't. But the fact that he gives them to us means we really could. But sometimes, especially if you're starting from zero, there's a limit to how hard you could work and how hard you could focus when I still have to go to work in a half hour and I still have to daven. There's just a limit to how much I could focus and how much time I could spend. So Hashem says, you know what? You really did put in an effort. You got up early. You tried. I'm going to help you out this time. You got to ask for help. Hashem will help. Over time, the more you do it, hopefully you'll get to the place where you end up doing it yourself because you're really capable of doing it yourself. Because if you weren't capable of doing it yourself, it wouldn't be a struggle. It wouldn't be your mission. It wouldn't be your job. And that's why there are certain people that have challenges and struggles, whether it's thoughts or other issues in their lives. Other people don't. Why don't all people have the same things? Because not all people can handle the same type of stress and struggle. Okay.
Is there a Jewish prayer that is similar to the Serenity Prayer? You're familiar with Serenity
Yeah.
Prayer?
Tanya. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, acknowledging that God is the creator of the world, that he's giving us these mitzvahs, that it's in his hands. And he asked me to do something, so I'm going to do what he's asking me to do. In other words, it's the same idea. Everything in Judaism, God is that idea. God is much more than that idea. What I'm saying is, if you think about God, then you've thought about the Serenity Prayer. Are there words to that language? I don't know. In the morning prayers, there is one of the paragraph right before the Torah blessings. There's two paragraphs. One is a blessing and one is a Yehi Ratzon. You know what I'm talking about? I'll read.
There's the 3 Torah blessings.
No, but right before that.
Before the great so
Yeah. May it be your will, Hashem of our fathers, to accustom us to study Torah. Okay. Do not bring us to sin, etc. Then the next paragraph. May it be your will, again, God of my fathers, to protect me this day and every day from insolent men, from impudence, from a wicked man, from an evil companion, from an evil neighbor, from an evil occurrence, from an evil eye, from a malicious tongue, from slander, from false testimony, from men's hate, from calamitous charges, okay, from unnatural death, from a lot of things, from the destructive adversary, from a harsh judgment. There was one second. So, here. May keep us far from an evil person, before that. Do not bring us to sin, nor to transgression or iniquity, nor into temptation or scorn. In other words, we're asking Hashem to send us the things we're capable of dealing with, the things that will, are easier for us to deal with, and the things that we're capable of dealing with, not things that will just get us depressed and that we can't fix anyway.
I mean, we always say that God gives us challenges, that he knows what we can do. He's not going to give us something impossible.
Right. The donkey only gets the load to which it's capable of carrying.
Right. But I was thinking of what you were saying about, father and parents and the children, but I'm thinking even from my teaching, Hebrew, and I know some of the capabilities. I have a small group, and one of the kids I know has some difficulties, and so I give him like the easier thing so he can participate. But if I go around the room and I say, okay, I asked him, do you want to do this? No, go around. He said, okay, fine. And if he can't get it, I'll give him a couple of chances, and then he says, okay, I don't want to bring the other kids down with him. He says, okay, I'll give him a hint and hint along. And then sometimes, then he'll pick up and he'll get the idea.
Very good, yeah.
Repetition. And I'm noticing that more and more as I'm teaching. I thought last week I had one kid who just wasn't concentrating. He was all over the room, spinning dreidels and everything. I told him the story, the origin story of, how it relates to Hanukkah about, the teacher brings the kids out into the field and says, hey, you like field trips? This was an actual field. They went to a cave, they studying Torah. They had to look out, when the soldier comes, put the books away, take the dreidels out, and then the soldier says, are you studying Torah? He says, no, sir, we're just playing dreidel. Don't let me catch you studying Torah. And so that was it. And then so I recreated that. And then when Heather Weiser, who's we did it at SAKI with the kids, and she comes around, are you playing dreidel? And says, yes, says Heather. And says, why aren't you studying? It's because it's Hanukkah. So I had a little twist on it. The kids appreciate that.
Okay, we'll conclude with a story, and then I'll just summarize the last few chapters because we're going to start sort of another subject matter, the same topic, but a different twist next week. There's a story with the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash was the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the fourth Chabad Rebbe. He was approached by a non-Chassid once, and he asked the Rebbe, why do Chassidim daven so long? Why do they spend so much time davening? If you're trying to get rid of your foreign thoughts so you could think about every word of the prayer, wouldn't it be wiser to daven quickly? Like this, you don't even give the mind time to send in the foreign thoughts. And he brought an example. He said, if you're in a horse and buggy, that's what they rode back then, and you're driving down the road, if people are throwing rocks at you, what do? Stop and fight them? Or you're in a horse, go faster and outrun them. Why would you stop and fight them if you can outrun them? So the Rebbe said that would be true if the people are standing outside the wagon throwing rocks inside. Then you can outrun them. But once they've gotten into the wagon, the faster you run won't help a thing.
Right.
Now you got to stop and get rid of them. Now the Alter Rebbe says we don't fight them. You can't fight the foreign thoughts, because if you do, you're just going to dirty yourself. But you got to stop and refocus your mind. You got to stop thinking about it by trying to think about something else, by focusing your mind on the prayer. And once your mind is focused, then you continue going. But because the animal soul is within you, because we possess these foreign thoughts within ourselves, running faster won't help get rid of it, because it's within us the whole time anyway. Okay, so from chapter 26, so we did 26, 27, 28, was dealing with all the types of negative thoughts that can bring down a person, can cause a person to have negative emotions when we're supposed to serve God with joy. So how do we get rid of these negative emotions? So we discussed 5 different types of negative thoughts that create negative emotions, 5 different things that can create negative emotions. The first one was physical. In chapter 26, the first half we discussed problems in your life, whether it's with health, with children, with wealth, with your job, just things in your life that are difficult. What's the way to get rid of that? To remember that it comes from God, it's all for the good. There's a blessing here, and that will keep your mind positive even while struggling with the difficulties of life. Remember, these are not difficulties that are a result of your choices. They're difficulties that are thrust upon you, right? When a person gets sick, it's not his choice. Then we went, next we dealt with feelings of guilt, of the past, of my sins. And the way to deal with that was to make an appointment. Make an appointment, because when you're working, you're supposed to be, when you're trying to study, you're supposed to be happy. When you're serving God, you're supposed to be happy. These thoughts are trying to make you sad while you're trying to be happy. That means it's coming. You're not thinking about it now because that's coming from the godly soul. This is the animal soul trying to stick these thoughts into your mind. Set up a time for it and deal with it. If it's things you did in the past you truly regret and have to deal with it, but at a specific time, because when you're in control, when you set the time, you're in a better position to deal with it. You know, when you react to negative feelings, you become very down. But when you decide, okay, now I'm going to deal with it, now you're in control, you're in a better mood, you're in control. So we do it once a day, or once a week, or once a month, whatever it is. You designate time to deal with it. Yeah. Then there is dealing with immoral thoughts that come into your mind during work. And we said you should be happy because now you have the opportunity to do a mitzvah. You have the opportunity to do a mitzvah, not to think about those things. When do you do that mitzvah? When you're not tempted to think about them? No. If you're not tempted, you're not. So when you're tempted and you actively push those thoughts out of your mind by thinking about something else, now you're doing a mitzvah. That should bring you joy. And if you're sad about the fact, but how could these thoughts even come to me? How am I capable of having these immoral thoughts? So we said at the end of chapter 27, that's because you don't realize who you are. You think you're a tzaddik. But if you realize you're a Beinani, that shouldn't cause you to be sad. And then in this week, we dealt with immoral thoughts during prayer. And the way to deal with that is stop thinking about it. And if you truly can't, you got to pray to God to help you. Now, So far, it sounds like there's never room for sadness.
That's 4. Did you say 5 things?
5. The first one is, what was the first one?
Problems in your
Problems
life,
In life, yeah.
then feelings of guilt,
Yeah.
sins, and
Immoral thoughts.
dealing with immoral thoughts while working and immoral thoughts while
That's
praying.
right.
Well, but between immoral thoughts while working, so there's dealing with the actual immoral thought. Yeah, and then there's the sadness that can come from the fact that I'm even capable of having the immoral thought. In other words, now that I got rid of the immoral thought, how did it even come to me? And the same applies with this. In other words, what you have as number 3 and 4, number 5 deals with the same for both. How can I even have immoral thoughts? Because you're a Beinoni, you're not a tzaddik. Now, does that mean there's never place for sadness? We find places in the Torah where it speaks about a broken heart. Well, what's a broken heart? How do you cry or do tshuva if you're not if you're happy? Yeah. So Alter Rebbe is going to discuss. It's going to be a little downer, and not downer because it's from a Hasidic perspective. But chapters 29, 30, and 31 are going to talk about when it's appropriate to be sad and what type of sadness is appropriate. Then we're going to go to chapter 32 in Tanya, which is, it wasn't in the first edition in Tanya. It was added later, so it can be seen as a separate chapter. Although it's connected, it's really not related to this theme of serving God with joy. And then in chapters 33 and 34, we're going to come back to joy, and we're going to give you spiritual reasons why you should be happy. Notice, till now we've been negating the negative, why you shouldn't have negative thoughts, and that it's important to be happy, to serve Hashem with happiness, right? To be happy. But are there any, is there any material I can meditate on to make me happy, to bring joy into my life? That will be chapters 33 and 34 that will conclude this section from 26 to 34 about happiness. So 26, 27, 28 was how to avoid sadness. 29, 30, 31 is going to be when it's appropriate to be sad and what type of sadness. 32 is Ahavat Yisrael, love of a fellow Jew, which somewhat doesn't relate to this topic. And then 33 and 34 is going to be reasons why a person should, to make a person happy. All right, we're going to stop there.
Right? There's a time for joy and a time for sadness.
There are many